The morning coffee tasted bitter in Ambassador Thyrix's mouth as he read through the human delegation's final plea. The document was printed on primitive paper, written in their crude language, and filled with emotional appeals that made his scaled skin crawl with disgust. He pushed the papers aside and looked across the vast chamber where representatives from 12 different species sat in their designated areas. Each alien race had their own reasons for wanting Earth cleansed. The Altani needed the planet's water, reserves for their dying homeworld. The Vrex Collective wanted to strip mine the rare minerals buried in Earth's crust. The Kalari saw humans as a violent species that would only cause trouble if allowed to join galactic civilization. All of them agreed on one thing. Humans had to go. "The final vote will be taken in 1 hour," announced Speaker Korth, his voice echoing through the chamber's crystalline walls. The massive alien's 6 arms gestured toward the holographic display, showing Earth rotating slowly in space. "All evidence suggests the human species lacks the maturity for galactic citizenship." Thyrix nodded in agreement. He had studied human behavior for 3 years, watching their wars, their pollution, their endless conflicts over resources and beliefs. They were like children, playing with dangerous toys, too primitive to understand the consequences of their actions. The galaxy would be safer without them. Dr. Nala of the Vrex Collective stood up on her 4 legs, her multiple eyes scanning the assembled representatives. "The solar enhancement device is ready for deployment. We have calculated the exact energy levels needed to create a controlled stellar flare. The radiation will sterilize all surface life while leaving the planet's infrastructure mostly intact." "What about the humans in space stations and underground facilities?" asked Representative Zorth from the Kalari Union, his tentacles waving nervously. "Our scans show minimal human presence below ground level," Nala replied confidently. "Their space stations are primitive and will be destroyed by the electromagnetic pulse. Within 72 hours of the flare, all human life will cease to exist." The chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Thyrix thought about the human ambassadors who had pleaded for their species just weeks ago. They had offered to share their technology, their culture, their art. They had promised to change their violent ways if given a chance. But promises meant nothing when dealing with a species that had nearly destroyed its own planet twice with nuclear weapons. "I call for the final vote," Speaker Korth announced. "All in favor of proceeding with the solar enhancement project?" Hands, claws, tentacles, and appendages rose throughout the chamber. Thyrix raised his own scaled arm without hesitation. The vote was unanimous. 3,000 miles below Earth's Pacific Ocean, Dr. Owen Reed was completely unaware that his species had just been sentenced to death. The research station Deepwatch 7 was his home for the past 6 months, a small bubble of human technology suspended in the crushing darkness of the ocean floor. Owen spent his days studying the strange formations that had appeared around. The hydrothermal vents, glowing clusters of what appeared to be algae unlike anything in Earth's biological records. The organisms pulsed with their own light, creating patterns that seemed almost intelligent. Owen's instruments detected unusual energy readings from the formations, electromagnetic signatures that didn't match any known life form. The algae appeared to feed on radiation and heat from the thermal vents, but they also absorbed other forms of energy in ways that puzzled him. "Another anomalous reading," Owen muttered to himself as he checked his equipment. The algae formations had been growing larger over the past month, spreading across the ocean floor in geometric patterns that reminded him of circuit boards or neural networks. His weekly reports to the surface research team described fascinating biological discoveries, but Owen suspected these organisms might be something more than simple sea life. The research station's communication array crackled to life, connecting him to Dr. Martinez at the surface facility. "Owen, we're getting some strange readings from the solar monitoring satellites. There's unusual activity in the sun's corona." "Probably just normal solar weather," Owen replied, his attention focused on the sample containers filled with the glowing algae. I'm more concerned about these organisms down here. They're exhibiting behavior patterns that suggest higher intelligence. What kind of behavior? Martinez asked, her voice distorted by the communication delay. They respond to changes in electromagnetic fields. When I adjust my equipment settings, they change their light patterns accordingly. It's like they're trying to communicate. Owen carefully extracted a small sample of the algae and placed it under his microscope. The cellular structure was unlike anything he had ever seen, with crystalline components that seemed to process energy at the quantum level. Above him, the Galactic Council's massive solar enhancement device moved into position at the edge of Earth's solar system. The weapon looked like a twisted metal flower, its petals designed to focus and amplify stellar radiation. Council technicians made final adjustments to the targeting systems, preparing to turn humanity's own sun into the instrument of their destruction. All systems are ready, reported Chief Engineer Venth from the weapon platform. The device will create a Class 12 solar flare directed specifically at Earth. The electromagnetic pulse will destroy all technology, while the radiation will eliminate all organic life within 96 hours. Thyrex watched the preparations from the comfort of his command ship, feeling satisfied that the galaxy would soon be rid of humanity's chaotic influence. The humans had shown promise in some areas. Their art and music were surprisingly sophisticated, but they were too dangerous to allow into galactic civilization. Better to end their story now before they could spread their violence to other worlds. Initiate the solar enhancement sequence, he ordered. The weapon came alive with crackling energy, its metallic petals spreading wide like a deadly flower blooming in space. Streams of focused particles shot toward Earth's sun, penetrating deep into the stellar core where they would trigger the massive flare that would end human civilization forever. Owen felt the research station's power systems fluctuate as the first effects of the enhanced solar activity reached Earth. He looked up from his microscope, unaware that he was witnessing the beginning of humanity's extinction. The algae samples in his containers pulsed brighter, as if they somehow sensed what was coming. The warning alarm started screaming at exactly 14:23 Greenwich Mean Time. Air traffic controllers around the world watched in horror as every aircraft in the sky simultaneously lost all electronic systems. Passenger jets became metal coffins, falling from 30,000 feet. Military bases went dark as their radar systems fried. Nuclear power plants began emergency shutdowns as their control systems failed one by one. In downtown New York, office workers pressed their faces against windows as the city's power grid collapsed in a cascade of sparks and explosions. Traffic, lights died, elevators stopped between floors, and cell phone towers toppled as their electronics melted from the inside out. The electromagnetic pulse that preceded the solar flare's radiation was like nothing humanity had ever experienced. Sarah. Peterson was driving her daughter to school when their car suddenly died on the highway. The engine stopped, the radio went silent, and the electronic dashboard went black. Around them, hundreds of other vehicles coasted to a stop as their computerized systems failed. Sarah tried to restart the car, but nothing happened. The key wouldn't even turn in the ignition. "Mom, what's happening?" her 8-year-old daughter Lucy asked from the back seat. "I don't know, sweetheart," Sarah replied, though she had a terrible feeling in her stomach. As a former military communications officer, she recognized the signs of a massive electromagnetic pulse. But this was far beyond anything she had trained for. The sky began to change color. What started as a normal blue morning transformed into an eerie green glow as charged particles from the enhanced solar flare hit Earth's atmosphere. The aurora borealis, normally visible only in polar regions, painted the entire sky in sheets of dancing light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Dr. Lisa Chang was in her laboratory at the Centers for Disease Control when the power died. Her computer screens went black, just as she was reviewing data about a strange increase in electromagnetic radiation detected by satellites. The backup generators kicked in for a few seconds. Then they died too. Emergency lighting failed. Even her battery-powered equipment wouldn't function. "The electronics are completely fried," her colleague Tom said, holding up a handheld radiation detector that was supposed to be hardened against electromagnetic interference. "Whatever hit us was strong enough to destroy military-grade equipment." Lisa looked out the window at Atlanta's skyline. Smoke was rising from several buildings where electrical systems had overloaded. In the distance, she could see a passenger plane falling toward the airport, its engines dead. The city was dying around them, and she suspected this was just the beginning. 3,000 meters below the Pacific Ocean, Owen felt Deep Watch 7 shudder as the electromagnetic pulse reached the ocean floor. The research station's main power systems failed instantly. Backup batteries lasted only minutes before they too were overwhelmed by the electrical interference. Emergency lighting flickered and died, leaving Owen alone in the absolute darkness of the deep ocean. But something strange was happening in the water around him. The algae formations that he had been studying began to glow brighter than ever before. Their light pulsed in complex patterns, as if they were responding to the electromagnetic chaos above. Owen pressed his face against the station's viewing portal and watched in amazement as the organisms seemed to come alive with energy. "Incredible," he whispered to himself. "They're absorbing the electromagnetic radiation." The station's life support systems were failing. Carbon dioxide levels were rising as the air recyclers stopped working. Owen had perhaps 6 hours of breathable air remaining and no way to contact the surface for rescue. Even if rescue were possible, he doubted anyone up there was still alive. Above the ocean, the second wave of destruction was beginning. The massive dose of solar radiation that followed. The electromagnetic pulse was thousands of times stronger than normal. It passed through Earth's weakened magnetic field like it wasn't there, bathing the planet in deadly energy that began destroying organic molecules on contact. In hospitals around the world, patients on life support died as their machines failed. But even those who didn't depend on technology began to feel the effects within hours. Nausea, dizziness, and severe headaches were the first symptoms. Doctors who still had working equipment recognized the signs immediately: acute radiation syndrome. The livestock died first. Cattle collapsed in fields across the American Midwest. Sheep in Scotland stopped moving and lay down in pastures, their bodies unable to process the cellular damage caused by the radiation. Birds fell from the sky in massive flocks, their navigation systems destroyed by the electromagnetic interference and their bodies poisoned by radiation. Sarah Peterson held her daughter close as they sat in their dead car on the highway. Lucy had started vomiting an hour after the pulse hit, and her skin was beginning to show the red flush that Sarah recognized as radiation burns. Other families were suffering the same fate, children crying, adults trying to stay calm while their bodies began to shut down. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" Lucy asked weakly. Sarah couldn't bring herself to lie to her daughter. "I don't know, baby. But we're together, and that's what matters." By sunset on the first day, half of humanity was dead or dying. The electromagnetic pulse had destroyed every hospital, every communication system, every piece of modern technology that could have helped coordinate a response. The radiation was too intense for human cells to repair the damage. Those who hadn't died from the initial exposure were living on borrowed time. Dr. Chang used her medical training to help other survivors in the CDC building, but she knew it was hopeless. The radiation levels were far beyond anything survivable. She estimated that the entire human population would be dead within a week, possibly less. In his underwater tomb, Owen watched the algae formations spread across the ocean floor like wildfire. The organisms were thriving on the deadly energy that was killing everything else on Earth. They pulsed and glowed with an intelligence that seemed almost aware of the catastrophe happening above. As his oxygen ran low and carbon dioxide poisoning began to affect his thinking, Owen made a decision that seemed like madness. If the algae could absorb and process the deadly radiation, maybe they could protect him too. He put on the station's emergency diving suit and prepared to leave the safety of Deepwatch 7. The algae formations called to him with their alien light, and Owen began to suspect that his species' extinction might not be the end of the story after all. The cold Pacific water rushed into Owen's lungs as he opened the airlock of Deepwatch 7. He had expected to drown immediately, but something impossible was happening. The glowing algae formations surrounding the research station responded to his presence, flowing toward him like living liquid light. They wrapped around his body in streams of blue-green energy, and somehow, Owen found he could breathe. The alien organisms entered his bloodstream through his skin, rewriting his cellular structure at the molecular level. Owen felt his DNA changing, his nervous system expanding, his entire biology transforming into something new. The process should have killed him instantly, but instead he felt more alive than ever before. His human consciousness remained intact while his body became something that could survive in the crushing depths of the ocean. Weeks passed before Owen fully understood what had happened to him. The algae wasn't just alien life from another world. It was technology, a form of nanotechnology so advanced that it appeared biological to human instruments. The organisms had been waiting on Earth for centuries, carried here by an asteroid that was actually a carefully disguised spacecraft. Through his new symbiotic connection, Owen began to receive information directly into his brain. Images of vast, alien civilizations, star maps showing the locations of inhabited worlds, and most importantly, the technical specifications of the weapon that had destroyed his species. The algae showed him everything. The Galactic Council's deliberations, their cold calculation that humanity was too dangerous to live, and their complete confidence that Earth was now empty and ready for colonization. The rage that built inside. Owen was unlike anything he had ever felt as a purely human being. 8 billion people had been murdered by aliens who saw them as nothing more than pests to be exterminated. His wife, his children, his friends, every person he had ever known was gone. Earth itself had become a tomb, its cities filled with the decaying bodies of an entire species. But Owen was no longer just human. The algae had given him abilities that bordered on the supernatural. He could manipulate electromagnetic fields with his thoughts, generate energy discharges that could power a small city, and most incredibly, he could reach out with his consciousness across vast distances. The symbiotic organisms had connected him to a network of quantum communication that spanned the galaxy. From his position on the ocean floor, Owen began to explore this new form of existence. He discovered he could interface directly with any electronic system, taking control of it with just a thought. The few satellites that had survived the initial pulse in hardened orbits became his eyes and ears, showing him the full extent of Earth's devastation. The surface of his home planet was a wasteland. Dead forests stretched from horizon to horizon. Empty cities crumbled under the effects of uncontrolled fires and structural collapse. The great works of human civilization, the pyramids, the Great Wall, the Statue of Liberty, stood as monuments to an extinct species. No birds sang, no animals moved, no plants grew. Earth had become as lifeless as the moon. But Owen was learning that death and revenge were not the same thing. The algae carried within it the memories of its creators, an ancient race that had transcended physical existence eons ago. They had left behind these technological organisms as seeds, waiting for the right moment and the right host to carry out their ultimate purpose, protecting younger species from the kind of galactic predators that had just destroyed humanity. The symbiosis was changing Owen's mind as well as his body. He could think in multiple dimensions, process information at quantum speeds, and perceive time in ways that no human brain could handle. He began to understand technologies that were millions of years ahead of anything humans had achieved. More importantly, he learned how to use these technologies as weapons. The first test came when a Galactic Council probe ship entered Earth's solar system. The small vessel was conducting routine scans to confirm that the human extinction was complete. Its crew of 3 Kalari technicians expected to find a dead world, ripe for resource extraction. Instead, they found Owen. The probe ship's instruments detected massive energy readings coming from Earth's ocean floor, but the crew dismissed the readings as after effects of the solar flare. They had no way of knowing that Owen was learning to weaponize the same forces that had killed his species. He reached out with his transformed consciousness, touching the ship's electronic systems across thousands of miles of space. The Kalari crew watched in terror as their control panels began, smoking and sparking. Their life support systems failed one by one. Emergency protocols activated and immediately shut down again as Owen took control of every circuit and wire on their ship. Within minutes, the 3 aliens experienced the same agonizing death that had claimed 8 billion humans. But Owen wasn't satisfied with simply killing the crew. He downloaded every piece of information from their ship's computer systems, learning about Council fleet movements, their planned timeline for Earth's colonization, and most importantly, the locations of their home worlds. The Algae processed this information and began showing Owen detailed tactical analyses of every Council species' weaknesses. As the months passed, Owen's abilities continued to grow. He learned to manipulate gravitational fields, bending space-time itself to his will. He could generate electromagnetic pulses that made the original solar flare look like a static shock. Most terrifyingly, he discovered he could reach across interstellar distances and interface with technology on other worlds. The Altani homeworld was the first to experience Owen's expanding power. Their orbital defense platforms suddenly turned, their weapons on the planet below, bombarding cities with their own protective systems. The electromagnetic pulse that followed wiped out every piece of Altani technology, leaving their civilization in ruins. Billions of the scaled aliens died exactly as humans had died, and Owen felt a cold satisfaction as he watched their suffering. The Vrex Collective's industrial worlds were next. Owen turned their massive mining robots against their creators, using the machines to tear apart the cities that had voted for humanity's extinction. The four-eyed aliens tried to shut down their automated systems, but Owen's control was absolute. Their own technology had become their executioner. From his position in the deep ocean, Owen continued his methodical revenge against every species that had participated in humanity's murder. He was no longer just a human scientist studying Algae. He had become something new, something terrifying, something that the galaxy had never seen before. He was the ghost of an extinct species, armed with technology beyond imagination and driven by a rage that could burn through the heart of stars. The Galactic Council began to receive fragmentary distress calls from their member worlds. But the messages were garbled and incomplete. Systems were failing across multiple star systems, and no one could explain why. They had no idea that their systematic extinction of humanity had created their own destroyer, a being of pure vengeance who would not rest until every alien civilization that had voted for Earth's destruction lay in ruins. Admiral Koreth of the Council fleet stared at the tactical display with growing dread. Red warning indicators covered the three-dimensional map of known space, each one representing a member world that had gone silent in the past 6 months. The pattern made no sense according to any military strategy he understood. The attacks seemed random, hitting industrial worlds and civilian colonies with equal fury. "Report from the Altani system, Admiral," his communications officer announced, with barely controlled fear. "The entire orbital defense network has been destroyed. Population centers on 3 planets show massive casualties. The survivors are reporting that their own weapons turned against them. Koreth's 4 arms trembled as he processed the information. The Altani had possessed one of the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy, capable of stopping entire invasion fleets. Something with unimaginable power was methodically destroying every civilization that had voted to exterminate the humans. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Vrex homeworld," another officer reported. "It's very weak and breaking up, but they're requesting immediate assistance. Their mining colonies are under attack by their own automated systems." The bridge of the Council flagship fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Koreth had commanded fleets for 3 decades, fought in wars against rebel colonies and space pirates, but nothing had prepared him for this invisible enemy that could turn entire civilizations against themselves. In the depths of Earth's Pacific Ocean, Owen sensed the growing panic among the Council races through their own communication networks. His consciousness had expanded far beyond the limitations of human thought, allowing him to monitor thousands of alien worlds simultaneously. The symbiotic Algae had given him access to quantum communication channels that spanned the entire galaxy. He was no longer the frightened scientist who had escaped death by accident. Owen had become something that the galaxy had never seen before, a hybrid of human consciousness and alien technology driven by a thirst for vengeance that burned hotter than any star. The Algae whispered to him constantly, showing him new ways to use the advanced capabilities they had given him. The next target was carefully chosen for maximum psychological impact. The Kalari Union's capital world housed the central government that had enthusiastically supported humanity's extinction. Owen reached across the light years with his enhanced consciousness, touching the planet's global computer network with thoughts that moved faster than electricity. The Kalari's own security systems turned against them within hours. Automated. Police units began attacking civilian populations. Traffic control systems sent transport vehicles crashing into buildings. Even their food production facilities were reprogrammed to produce toxins instead of nutrients. The tentacled aliens died by the millions as their own technology became their executioner. Ambassador Thyrix received the reports from Kalari space while aboard his personal transport ship. The scale of destruction was beyond comprehension. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble by their own defensive systems. The planetary communication grid was broadcasting the same message repeatedly in perfect Kalari. "This is for humanity. This is for Earth." "Turn the ship around," Thyrix ordered his pilot, his scaled skin turning pale with fear. "Set course for the Outer Rim. We need to get as far away from Council space as possible." But Owen's reach extended far beyond the core worlds. The hybrid consciousness that had once been a human scientist was learning to manipulate space-time itself, bending the fundamental forces of physics to his will. Distance meant nothing when you could touch the quantum fabric of reality and reshape it according to your desires. Thyrix's ship was 3 days from the nearest Council world when its navigation systems began to malfunction. The artificial gravity generators started cycling on and off, creating chaos throughout the vessel. Emergency systems activated randomly, flooding some compartments with toxic gases while depressurizing others. The crew tried desperately to regain control, but every system on the ship had been compromised. In the final moments before his death, Thyrix understood with perfect clarity what was happening. The humans had somehow survived their extinction, and one of them had become something far more dangerous than the Council had ever imagined. As his ship's life support failed and his breathing apparatus filled with poison gas, Thyrix experienced the same agonizing death that 8 billion humans had suffered. The Council's military response was massive, but ultimately futile. They assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, 300 warships carrying enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. Admiral Koreth led the armada toward Earth, convinced that they could find and eliminate whatever was causing the systematic destruction of their civilization. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, expecting to face some unknown alien threat that had claimed their worlds. Their sensors detected massive energy readings coming from Earth's ocean floor, but the signatures were unlike anything in their databases. Whatever was down there was generating power, levels that rivaled small stars. All ships, maintain formation, Koreth broadcast to the fleet. Deploy the orbital bombardment platforms. We'll sterilize the entire planet if necessary. Owen sensed their arrival the moment they dropped out of hyperspace. 300 ships, carrying the combined military might of 12 different species, all coming to destroy the last trace of humanity. The irony was perfect. They were about to learn that humans were far more dangerous dead than they had ever been alive. The battle began when Owen reached out with his consciousness and touched the fleet's command ship. Admiral Koreth watched in horror as his tactical displays began showing false information, his weapons targeting systems identified friendly ships as hostile targets, and his navigation computers started plotting collision courses with other vessels in the fleet. Emergency shutdown of all computer systems, Koreth shouted, but it was too late. Owen's control extended to every electronic circuit, every power coupling, every piece of technology aboard the ship. The Admiral's orders were countermanded before his crew could execute them. One by one, the Council warships began turning their weapons on each other. Massive energy beams designed to crack planets apart struck neighboring vessels, causing chain reactions of destruction that lit up the darkness of space. Ships that tried to retreat found their engines pushing them deeper into the battle zone. Escape pods were programmed to fly directly into the nearest star. In less than an hour, the most powerful fleet in galactic history had destroyed itself completely. Admiral Koreth died when his flagship's reactor overloaded, the explosion visible from Earth's surface as a brief new star in the night sky. The wreckage of 300 warships slowly drifted apart, carrying the bodies of 50,000 alien soldiers who had come to finish what their governments had started. Owen felt a cold satisfaction as he watched the debris field expand. Justice had been served with a precision and fury that no alien species would ever forget. But his work was not yet complete. There were still worlds to burn, still civilizations to bring low, still debts to be paid in blood and suffering. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you tried to exterminate humanity. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in a hidden bunker deep beneath the surface of Nexus Prime, the last remaining stronghold of organized alien civilization. Of the 12 species that had voted to exterminate humanity, only scattered survivors remained. Representatives huddled in the underground chamber, their various breathing apparatus and life support systems casting eerie shadows on the metal walls. Speaker Koreth's massive form shook with terror as he addressed the remnants of galactic leadership. In 6 months, we have lost 80% of our combined population. Our home worlds lie in ruins. Our fleets have been destroyed, and we still don't know exactly what we're fighting. The few surviving intelligence officers had pieced together fragments of the truth. The energy readings from Earth suggested a single consciousness of unimaginable power, something that could manipulate matter and energy across interstellar distances. The repeated message broadcasts in various alien languages all pointed to the same source. Someone was making the Council pay for humanity's extinction. Dr. Nayla, of the Vrex Collective, now the last of her species, stood on trembling legs to address the assembly. Our analysis of the attack pattern suggests we're dealing with a form of consciousness that has transcended physical limitations. It can interface directly with any technological system, regardless of security protocols or physical barriers. How is that possible? Demanded General Vex of the surviving Kalari military forces. No known species in the galaxy possesses such capabilities. Unknown species is the key phrase, Nala replied grimly. We assumed Earth contained only humans. We may have been catastrophically wrong. Owen heard their desperate discussions through their own communication systems. his enhanced consciousness monitoring every transmission, every whispered conversation, every panicked prayer to alien gods. The symbiotic Algae had evolved his sensory capabilities beyond anything the Council races could imagine. He could perceive quantum fluctuations, manipulate gravitational fields, and reach across space-time itself to touch distant worlds. But Owen was no longer driven purely by rage. The alien technology within him carried the memories and wisdom of an ancient civilization that had fought similar battles eons ago. Through the Algae's collective consciousness, he learned about the cyclical nature of galactic civilization. Young races emerged, grew powerful, became arrogant, and ultimately destroyed other species they deemed inferior. The pattern had repeated for millions of years. The Algae had been waiting for the right moment and the right host to break that cycle permanently. Owen was not just seeking revenge for humanity's extinction. He was serving as the instrument of judgment for every species that had chosen genocide over coexistence. The final assault began when Owen tired of playing with his enemies. He had spent months demonstrating that their technology could not protect them, that their weapons could not harm him, and that their escape was impossible. Now it was time to finish what the Council had started. From the depths of Earth's Pacific Ocean, Owen reached out with his transformed consciousness and touched the sun itself. The same stellar manipulation technology that the Council had used to murder humanity now served as their final executioner. Owen began destabilizing the nuclear reactions in the cores of every star system that housed Council survivors. The Altani refugees on their colony worlds watched in horror as their new sun began to pulse with unstable energy. Solar flares erupted across the stellar surface, sending deadly radiation toward their planets. The irony was perfect. They would die exactly as they had chosen to kill humanity, burned alive by their own star's fury. The surviving Vrex colonies experienced the same fate. Their industrial worlds, already weakened by months of technological warfare, could not withstand the massive electromagnetic pulses generated by their dying sun. Billions of the four-eyed aliens perished as their own weapon was turned against them with surgical precision. In the hidden bunker on Nexus Prime, the final representatives of the Galactic Council felt their world begin to shake as gravitational fluctuations announced their sun's approaching death. Emergency systems failed one by one as Owen's consciousness penetrated even the deepest underground facilities. "This is impossible," Speaker Korth whispered as the bunker's lights flickered and died. No single being could have this much power. But Owen was no longer a single being. The symbiotic Algae had connected him to the accumulated knowledge and capabilities of a civilization that had evolved beyond physical existence. He represented not just human vengeance, but the judgment of every species that had ever been destroyed by galactic predators like the Council races. As the stellar fires consumed the last Council worlds, Owen stood alone in the ruins of his home planet. The symbiotic organisms flowed around him like living light, their purpose finally complete. Earth's cities lay empty and decaying, monuments to a species that had paid the ultimate price for the galaxy's arrogance. But humanity's story was not over. Through his quantum-enhanced consciousness, Owen could perceive other young civilizations throughout the galaxy. Species that were just beginning to develop space flight and dream of joining a galactic community. They would find a very different universe than the one that had existed before humanity's extinction. Word of the Council's fate spread quickly through the remaining alien civilizations. The few species that had opposed humanity's extinction, or had not yet achieved spaceflight themselves, learned about the terrible vengeance that had consumed 12 advanced civilizations in a matter of months. Earth became known throughout the galaxy by a name that was spoken only in whispers: the Graveyard of the Proud. No alien species would ever again dare to propose the systematic extinction of another civilization. The memory of what happened to the Galactic Council served as an eternal warning against the kind of arrogance that had destroyed humanity. The galaxy had learned that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. Owen continued his vigil beneath Earth's waves, no longer fully human, but carrying within him the essence of everything his species had been. The algae pulsed with satisfied energy. Around him and in their alien light, he could see the future they had created together. Young civilizations would grow and prosper under his protection. They would make mistakes, fight wars, and struggle with the same challenges that had once faced humanity. But they would be allowed to grow. They would be permitted to learn from their errors and evolve into something better. And if any species ever again chose genocide over coexistence, they would face not just human technology or human weapons, but the accumulated fury of every extinct civilization that had ever been destroyed by galactic predators. The universe had learned to fear the dead. And in that fear, the future of countless species was finally secure.